City of Hawthorne. It is called to order at 11:05 a.m. I will ask Sergeant Craig to please do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let me provide a little housekeeping rules. If you could please silence your cell phones. Anyone in the audience that needs to take a call, please take your call outside City Hall, not the lobby. There are restrooms in the back. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairwoman Reyes English.
Here.
City Manager Norris.
Present.
City Attorney Kim.
Here.
Interim Planning Director Greg McLean.
Here.
And Sergeant Kenny Craig.
Present.
Thank you so much. And I know we did Pledge of Allegiance first before the order, but thank you for that. Madam Clerk, please read the oral communications.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3, all remarks should be addressed to the committee as a body and not to any individual members. During oral communication, speakers shall have 3 minutes to state their business. The Brown Act prohibits the committee from providing a detailed response or acting upon any items not contained in the agenda. The committee as a body shall have the discretion at the close of oral communications to refer any remarks to the City Clerk Department for study, investigation, report, and/or recommendations.
Thank you so much. I'm looking out in the audience. There is no one here. I will, though, ask City Clerk, do we have any speaker cards?
Chairwoman Reyes English, we do not have any speaker cards.
Thank you so much. I have no other cards. If there is anyone else who wishes to address these bodies, form a line at the podium. Again, there was no one here. If there is no objections, I'll declare oral communications so ordered closed. Let's go ahead and go into our item number 2. Again, any written communications received by the City Clerk's office?
Chairwoman Reyes English, we did not receive any written communications.
Okay, thank you so much. Item number 3 is the discussion items. Ms. Anderson, please proceed, and we're looking at item A.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Today we have a few things that we just need to cover to wrap up the application process as well as the program materials. And so we wanted to just take a few minutes today to go over the timeline. So that's what we're starting with, the application intake process and the timeline. One of the action items was to review some of the third-party file receiving platforms that we could use or apps that we could use to accept applications. We looked at what West Hollywood used, which is the Box link. It's kind of like Dropbox. Went over all of the options for that, and it looks like it's going to be a good method. What we want to try to do, though, is if we wanted to get the approval of the committee to move forward with purchasing that software so that we can run some demos and make it more standardized, or I'm sorry, more specific to our Hawthorne process, but it's approximately like $30, so it's not like a huge investment per month that we need to use it, but I just wanted to bring that up because that's one of the things that we could do to make it custom.
Okay, so $30 at how many months?
I think we'll probably have to have it at least 2 to 3 months just to hold the store the data for the review.
So we'll say 3 months at 30?
3 months at 30.
So 30 times 3?
So $90.
Yeah. So let's just round it off to 100.
Okay, sure.
That's fine. Yes.
Perfect.
Can I get a motion?
Motion?
Second?
I second.
Thank you. So City Manager Vaughn made the motion, and City Attorney?
Somebody else
Who made
Greg.
Greg made the second. Thank you for that.
Through the chair, just a quick question.
Yes.
Ebony, will that go through billing from your side?
Yeah, we'll pay for it and then just send in for reimbursement.
Great, thank you.
And then I have a question also, and there was a couple of folks that weren't here at our previous meetings, so I just want to bring up to speed. We discussed an intake process date of starting August 15th. and that would run 30 days. And we talked about the online method, the Dropbox, to assure that all documents are received and everyone is aware of documents that are needed, and assuring that there aren't any missing documents. And then we discussed a process here at City Hall outside that will be set up so that applicants can then also come and drop those off. And that's for the most part going to be the process moving forward.
I have a question about that. So we're gonna start accepting applications before the council considers the ordinance?
So that's what we need to go over the timeline today. So we need to figure out what date we're gonna put the ordinance on for review. If, obviously not the 19th, not Tuesday, because that's the study session. But the next week, isn't there a regular scheduled hearing?
There is. It's the second Tuesday and fourth Tuesdays at 6 p.m. is the regular council meeting.
So would we have time to put it on that following,
July 26th.
on the July 26th hearing date?
So, okay, so we have a draft ordinance completed and it'll be submitted for the 26th meeting?
Well, that's what that's why we need to figure that out right now.
Okay.
I think we need to play with the dates and see what works, because doing that means that we have the study session on the 19th, which is next Tuesday, approximately 4 days from now. And then whatever feedback we get from that study section, we would then have to finalize all the documents, assuming that they've made any changes, which they very well may. And then incorporate those changes to prepare the documents for possibly the 26th or the following regular meeting, which is the 9th.
I'm going to be gone the week of the 26th. So my preference would be, following the 9th.
And if we had it on the 9th and they approved everything for the 9th, then we can start accepting applications on the 15th.
Okay.
And that's how we originally drafted the timeline. However, there is one possible hiccup, and that's the zoning text amendment, Greg. And I think we can take those separately, but we have most of the zoning text amendment pretty much done, actually. But we do have a couple of things that we'll go over in our next item with our program policy, policies that we need to discuss to get those final items. But the zoning text amendment, I think, needs to go to Planning Commission.
Yes.
So that would be a timeline that we would have to either run these things together, or we can run them parallel but concurrently.
Let's just, before we end this meeting, put all the dates, put all the timeline so that it's on the next agenda.
Yeah, so, okay, so you want to give a little bit of, first, with respect to the ordinance, you want to give it a little bit more time than August 15th, I would think, because the council may come back and say their first draft ordinance, they may say that they may have a preference as to certain changes they would want. For instance, licensing. We don't know whether they're going to approve all the different types of licensing, and I suspect that you're drafting an ordinance where the city will approve all of the licensing that we discussed previously, correct?
Well, yes, based on their previous direction that they've already approved those uses. So we're not adding any new uses that they didn't previously approve.
What they approved was for the working committee to look into all licensing to keep that option open. But once they see the ordinance, I suspect that not all council are going to approve, for instance, lounges, so there may be some changes. So it may not follow the typical order of ordinance where you have introduction and then adoption. At the introduction phase, they may say that council may not want to take up all of the licensing. So there may, in that sense, it may have to come back for reintroduction and readoption. So that may delay the process a little further.
I'm gonna, just real quick, because I do remember discussing it here also, going off of what they were telling us they wanted, right? I was the only one that was not filling the lounge, but I was obviously overvoted on that. But if I remember correctly, we had retail, cultivation, manufacturing. We had transport. What is it?
Distribution.
Distribution. Pass
Testing.
through the delivery, right? And lounge was the one that was added last. So at this point, we'll look at those as listed, and then bring those to the council, right? If there are any other changes that are made, I will then go ahead and maybe call for a special so that we could go ahead and move on with the specific timeline.
Except that I'm not sure whether we can do a special meeting for adoption of ordinance like that, because there's a, you have to provide an introduction and then another regular meeting for adoption for second reading. And where after introduction, if there is amendments or changes that council would want, then you have to reintroduce it again. So that's like a month process that may be delayed.
Let me ask you this. So for the timeline of the 26th, what is it, July 26th, that we're going to have the study session?
July 19th.
Or
is the
July 19th, excuse me, that's the study session.
Yes.
Can you add, can you include at that, in that agenda?
We could add that as a discussion action
Yes,
as following the study session where the council can vote on the different types of licensing.
yes, correct. And let's just go ahead and do that so that then the second time that it's coming back to us, it's already what, on the 26th? If we're doing the 19th and it's coming to the council on the 26th?
Yeah, so the introduction would be July 26th meeting,
Right.
regular meeting. Okay, so add.
So if we could keep that, the flow going. Okay, so let's just go ahead now and go to item B, which is program policies, social equity, design requirements, and other operational policies. Ms. Anderson.
Yes, just, Madam Chair, if I may just go back to that one, letter A, just to clarify, the application intake process for in-person. So we are going to have a designated staff member working on intake 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2 to do that in-person intake. If we see that there isn't a lot of, foot traffic for that, then maybe we'll move to an appointment scheduled, so we're not wasting time. But we'll start off with a couple days a week. That way applicants can come into the city, go through their checklist with someone there, determine that it's complete or incomplete. And again, the completeness determination is simply based on whether or not the application material checklist is completed, meaning they've submitted all the documents that we asked for. They're not going to be reviewed or scored or evaluated in any significant way, except for if they're complete documents or incomplete documents. That would happen in person. They would pay their fee for their application prior to that review. So we are taking in that application fee first. And then if they're incomplete or missing a document, for example, if they're missing an attestation or they're missing their lease, they would have until that final day that we accept applications to turn it in.
Okay, let me just say this real quick and not to interrupt. I want something posted on the board outside that gives the hours of accepting in person. If it's going to be 2 days out of the week, please give those 2 days in writing from 10 to 2. And please assure that those individuals are here from those hours. They're not leaving in advance. They're not going out to lunch. They're here. And whatever you post needs to be met. I say this because I used to be city clerk. And if we said something and then something changed, we're at fault, right? Because somebody should have been there. So I don't want that happening. So let's just make sure that we have it in writing, posted outside, posted somewhere where it's visible. It could be also the library, it could be the community center. Sometimes folks don't know where the city hall's at, and give them directions with the address to city hall. And please assure that. And if there is a change, we need advance notice that there's going to be a change to appointments. And that advance notice needs to be more than 3 days in advance that it's going to go to appointments. And then that needs to be posted across the board on the website and in writing.
Yes, I have a question. Yes.
Yes.
As far as the intake of applications, will you set up or illustrate protocols that our staff need to have in place so we can train them on the accepting of applications and what needs to be vetted?
We're going to staff someone here so
Oh,
that
will
they're,
you?
yes,
So
that they're
that 10
already.
to 2 that
Yes.
Madam Chairwoman is asking for, you would have someone here
Yes,
those
we're going to
days?
have someone here who's already experienced doing it, so.
Perfect, thank you.
And unless you have a preference of having a staff member, but knowing that the staff members are pretty limited, we just went ahead and designated someone on our team.
Yeah, that's fine. And if Vaughn, you want to assign someone from our staff, should there be, say for instance, needs, and that person's only one and he needs a copy, they need this, my whole point is I don't want the table to be left empty,
Gotcha.
Right.
okay? That's
Absolutely.
that's what it boils down to. Somebody needs to be there, present.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Just the overall picture of this, the procedure involved. So we're gonna, if everything goes as planned, the application intake will start on August 15th. And you said there will be a cutoff date at some point?
Yeah, there's 30 days. So we have the timeline right now is 30 days for the application process. So from the date that we opened it, which is tentatively the 15th, and then to approximately September 15th, which is actually a Thursday. So that would be, we're doing Tuesdays and Thursdays in person, so that would be perfect.
And if once there is a cutoff and we have certain set number of applicants, then it goes to the licensing committee? Is that, I'm trying to figure out when the licensing committee would have to be formed, so, because we have to
Well,
prepare a
I-
resolution for that.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that's next that we're talking about is the evaluation and the oversight committees, because we do need to develop what that looks like and when they're gonna come into play. But ultimately, the process would be, if you choose to do in-person submittal, you're going to pay the city clerk, you're going to turn in all your application materials, we're gonna review them for completeness and let you know if it's complete. If it's complete, then it'll go in the to-be-reviewed pile. The question that we have to determine is, how do these committees work? So do they assemble for 1 to 2?
I'm sorry, let's go back to A. If we're done with A, let's continue to B, because the Evaluation Oversight Committee will be discussed in C.
Okay.
Okay?
So the only thing that we need to talk about for our policies are, we wanted to go over the social equity eligibility list, or the eligibility requirements and criteria, and then kind of go over what our process or our thought was for that process, just because I know, Robert, you weren't here last time, and we wanted to just make sure that we have everything. Tony, did you want to just kind of briefly go over that?
Absolutely. And we talked about there being 2 retail cannabis social equity licenses, and the criteria for verification are 4 points. Number 1, they have to have a California cannabis conviction or arrest before November 8th, 2016. 5 years cumulative residency from 1980 to 1997 in a disproportionately impacted area. 10 years cumulative residency as a Hawthorne homeowner or householder. Meets an income criteria that doesn't exceed the median income for the city of Hawthorne, which is approximately $72,000, a little above that for 2022. We talked about some of those social equity cannabis business license holder benefits, those being a security consultation with the Hawthorne Police Department, cannabis operators workshop, a 30-minute technical assistance session with a cannabis professional, and access to a cannabis professional vendor services list, as well as we discussed the facility being patrolled by the Hawthorne Police Department. We have the social equity applicant filling out a social equity application information verification form, and also what those supporting documents looks like in order to meet those 4 criteria points we discussed for social equity. So for example, proof of conviction, either the federal court records or the state court records, residency requirements that can look like California driver's license, ID, property tax, state or federal income tax returns, school records, medical records, banking records, applicable housing authority property records here in Hawthorne, utility, things of that nature. Proof of income, wage and tax statements, 2 months of pay stubs, eligibility information from general assistance, food stamps, Medi-Cal, CalWorks, or federal tax returns in an IRS verification form. So we also have a social equity verification attestation saying basically that the information provided is true and correct, and if it isn't, they understand that they cannot be considered as social equity without providing this information.
What was the second criteria?
5 years cumulative residency from 1980 to 1997 in a disproportionately impacted area. Remember, that's the conversation, Robert, we had regarding the war on drugs happening at that time, and that's part of our state standard.
Anyone else? No? Any questions? I have a question.
Sure.
With regards to the home ownership, 10 years, et cetera. Following the ordinance from the city of West Hollywood, what was their language, or are we implementing similar language from what they had?
Their language was, they didn't have a social equity program per se. They had where social equity brands and would be utilized. So that was part of the weighting criteria, part of the application. So for example, let's use Long Beach as an example. So Long Beach and LA has those residency criteria, and it's not only a homeowner, it's a householder, somebody that's been in the home for that period of time. So again, there's no social equity program that we looked at for West Hollywood, but we looked at LA and Long Beach. There's social equity weighing criteria with West Hollywood.
Okay, so including the home ownership or someone living in the city for a set period of time.
Absolutely.
What was the question? What was the income taxes for, or the
Income verification?
yeah? What was that for with regards to? I think it was, you said IR taxes and.
That goes to the fourth point of meeting the income criteria, that you don't make over 72 and some change, which is the Hawthorne medium income.
So 72,000.
It's 72,342 to be exact for 2022 when I looked it up.
Okay. That's for verification purposes.
Yes. That's income verification purposes.
So we have home ownership and or had been a resident of Hawthorne for 10 years and maybe still resides here.
We have that you have to satisfy 2 of the 4 criteria. So it's not all 4, it's 2 of the 4. So again, cannabis conviction, 5 years cumulative residency during that period of time where we have the disproportionately impacted area, 10 years cumulative residency as a Hawthorne homeowner or house holder being in the home, or they meet the income criteria of 72,342. It cannot exceed that amount.
And you made reference as to products.
Well, that was what West Hollywood did in the weighting criteria. So what West Hollywood said, look, we want you to have social equity brands. We want you to be conscious of social equity. And that was in the weighting criteria. I have it here, Madam Chairperson, so let me specifically give you the language from West Hollywood.
So just for clarity, the program for Hawthorne here for social equity, the reason why we have very specific criteria is because we're narrowing and targeting the eligible social equity in the terms of how the state forms social equity programming. And that is going to be the mechanism in which the city is able to capture any of those social equity dollars or funding from the state.
Yes,
Madam
go
Chair,
ahead.
I just want to clarify, it's 2 of the 4 criteria? They only have to meet 2?
Yes, 2 of the 4.
I guess I'm a little concerned. So if they met, let's say, the cannabis conviction and the household requirement, the minimum income wouldn't apply. So it's conceivable somebody making $200,000 and already has a business could get one of those precious 2 social equity licenses?
It's possible, but if you have a federal conviction, you might not be making $200,000.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just worried about something.
It is possible, but yeah, it's pretty unlikely
And
for some of them, for most of them, I should say.
Yeah, but good question. I think ultimately we would still, because of the ordinance, it would say, right? It would say up to 72,000 a year, right?
But
So-
if they met the other two, that
Yeah.
wouldn't apply.
Yeah,
They
Right.
could be making way more.
Right.
If they meet two of the other four.
But
so.
if we need to change that, we could do that.
We definitely can. We mirrored what the state requirements are.
Okay.
So that's where that's coming from, is some of the state or other local programs. So we kind of have a hybrid there. The income verification, the income isn't what makes you social equity, right? You could make $200,000 and still have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. But for us, the reason why we put local is because we're trying to also target our local or our existing business owners in the city who may otherwise not be eligible.
I understand, and I want to be careful that I'm not trying to split hairs on the social equity aspect. I guess what I really liked about the program when it was first presented to the committee was the fact that this could be like a startup. So I like the idea that we're reserving some of this for people who, like, conceivably, somebody could already have a successful cannabis business if they meet two of those criteria, would qualify for that social equity. That's my concern. I like the idea that it's kind of giving somebody a jump
chance,
start.
right?
you know,
Yeah,
to-
yeah, absolutely. So yes, in theory, someone can make $75,000 here, and still qualify under these two. But in terms of social equity, one of the largest demographics that we need to target are those who have been imprisoned for it. And so,
Understood.
say the income requirement is tricky there, because if we say all of them, instead of like a variety, and we can pull income either as one of the required ones and then say one of the other, there's a lot of different ways that we could do it. But the income verification in and of itself is always tricky, because if you do have an arrest or a conviction for cannabis and you make $75,000, maybe you're not in the city of Hawthorne or something like that, then we're limiting those individuals, and we're canceling them out. So we tried to give both what the state requirements ask for, any of the requirements, plus what some of the local programs ask for, to give us a more a range. But what we could do, if income is the factor that we want to limit the most, is making sure that it's a startup business. Maybe that's an extra criteria we could add, or we can have one of those criteria be one that you have to have. So you have to meet this one plus these other ones. The only thing about that I caution is that it is tricky verifying income, because we are going to have, like you're saying, we're going to have folks who have other businesses and may turn in their personal taxes, So we're going to have some gray area there when we're looking at income anyway. But I think we could pick one of those criteria to be the absolute, and then some of those other ones. If it's a conviction, or if it's a startup business, if we're saying, hey, if this is a new startup business, the only thing is that we also need to think about is when we're talking about social equity applicants, if we're doing a merit-based system, how would they compete with all the other application requirements? Because one of them is demonstrate your previous experience.
Right. And some of those might not have
Previous
prior
experience.
experiences and or brick and mortar businesses such as retail or, those alike, right?
Right.
But I think for the most part, I get it. I'm sure members, if there was any, additions,
Well, through the chair, I
yes.
have a couple of questions on that. You said that there's one of the factor is either conviction or arrest before November of 2016.
Correct.
And then you mentioned that there had to be a requirement under that they were imprisoned or in custody.
It's arrest or conviction.
Well,
That is
because
part of it.
I recall when we used to prosecute possession, it was a misdemeanor, but the max penalty was a $100 fine. It was a misdemeanor, and that's at least over 10 years ago. 10 years.
It's still a conviction.
Okay, so jail time is not required.
Jail time is not
Okay.
required. It's an arrest or a conviction.
Okay.
And it's going to show on the record when
It'll show on
when
the
we
record.
run their
Right,
little, their
it'll-
little fingers.
When they show their verification documents. Now, remember, these are all just criteria to, for the app to be considered a social equity applicant for the special licenses. Ultimately, the city council will determine based on the top scorers who they want. So if you had, let's say we had an applicant who had a conviction but also has cannabis licenses elsewhere, the city council can say, well, we're going to choose number 2 because they're a startup business and we want to allocate at least one of these to a startup business. That's a conversation that would happen at the council level. What we have here are just the eligibility requirements based on other local programs or the state program to ensure that we have some type of set program where we can possibly apply for that additional funding.
And the
Thank
second question I had on these factors was the 10 years residency or as a homeowner or a householder. I understand that the Hawthorne residents are about 70% are renters. So does that mean that for that factor, if you're a renter and you've been here for over 10 years, that you wouldn't qualify under that factor?
You will, under the definitions, it's
Household.
a homeowner, property owner, or a householder, meaning you're part of a household in the city of,
Non-occupant.
within the city. So it's more so a residency requirement, not a homeowner requirement.
Right.
But it could be a property owner, long-term property owner, or a long-term resident is essentially what the requirements are.
Thank you. Can we go to design requirements?
Yes, so we finished up the design guide. Greg, you're going to be getting that with some proposals for that. We went through and combed through the entire zoning code, and there are actually some requirements for design that we've pulled and incorporated, most of which are for new construction. However, since we anticipate some new uses in maybe older buildings or buildings that may not have a current business license, something happening. So our proposal is to treat those more like new construction in the sense that we bring everything to code. And in doing so, of course, we're not trying to make it so difficult to meet our design requirements. But we do have a landscaping portion of the ordinance that talks about the particular types of landscaping, including drought-tolerant landscaping. And in our current water crisis, I think that's important for us to have in there for a design requirement, as well as just some minor beautification efforts to help these new businesses present, more consistently with what the city wants to see in terms of beautification efforts in the general plan and the zoning code.
Through the chair, and that's design requirement is going to be codified into the ordinance?
Correct.
How is that even worded? Because it's kind of...
It'll be in the zoning text amendment.
Okay.
So we'll have 2 different documents. We're going to have our cannabis ordinance that will replace the chapter of marijuana uses that you currently have. So we will be swapping that out for our new ordinance requirements. And then as part of the design code, we would have some, which is already in the ordinance, we would add that special language regarding cannabis facilities. So we have 2 different documents. We have the ordinance for just cannabis specifically and cannabis uses and activities. And then we're going to have that zoning text amendment that will change the current text to incorporate all of the things into the zoning code from the ordinance that's specific to cannabis activities.
So the design requirement would be discretionary with the licensing committee?
It's not with it's in your zoning code now. It is not with the licensing committee. You have a design review committee that reviews design review. So all architectural design is pretty much reviewed through the planning department. And so if we have a conditional use permit application going with this, all of that is a part of it. So we would pretty much process it like any other CUP application. Once they've been selected, so we have 2 different processes. We have the selection process, right? Who gets a license? And then once we have those individuals who are selected or those businesses that are selected, they would then move through the entitlement process, which means that they're going to be pulling their conditional use permit. And that would be something that's pretty much handled at the planning department and planning commission levels, like any other conditional use permit. It wouldn't be something that our licensing committee would be overseeing. Our licensing committee would only be overseeing this application review process.
I see. Good to know. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. And I know during the very beginning stages of our approval through the city council to work with Ms. Anderson and your team, we discussed per item, if you remember, the scope of work and how we were going to collaborate to assure that those efforts move forward. So
Absolutely.
that was done from the very start. Operational policies.
Yes, so there's the last one this is going to be a fun one, the taxes. So we have a 5% tax by our ballot measure that's going to be imposed on all operations. So all businesses will have to pay 5% of their gross revenue back to the city, which is great. The question is, how frequently and by what means are we going to be collecting that tax money? And that's important because we need to make sure that we advise applicants the frequency. Is it monthly that they're going to be reporting? Is it self-reporting? Are we going to have an auditing firm? Are we doing this quarterly? Is it annually? Those are things that we need to know so that we can prepare information and update the FAQ sheet as well, but prepare information for the applicants to know going in, this is the compliance schedule for taxes. And then also we have a fee because we have our community benefit fee. We're presenting that on Tuesday to the council as a percentage or as a flat rate, but we will need to know how are we going to collect that money and how frequently we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, we did discuss that in length because that was one of my strong advocacy for. We had a lump sum, annual lump sum, and then we had a percentage. I was for the lump sum.
Right.
For the simple fact that, there's no projections for these businesses that are coming as to whether or not they're going to be successful in the first 2 years or not, let alone the first year, right? However, language is put there as a disclaimer, if you remember on the application, that there's a disclaimer that basically says that there's a commitment to the city of Hawthorne with regards to a community benefit so that they're well informed. And oftentimes these businesses are already having existing businesses, so those communities, those cities often place the same language so that everyone is informed and in the know. The social equity businesses should also be known. However, we need to, I think, still evaluate that with regards to the percentage and or the lump sum.
Correct.
For the simple fact that they are a social equity. However, I'm not trying to give away the farm. I want to assure that they have their fair share as well.
Correct. And I think the way that we had planned to present it to the council is, the pros and cons of each methodology of collecting it, right? Whether we do a percentage or we do a flat rate. But one of the things that we talked about is maybe having a delayed start, like maybe giving them a year to get off the ground before we start imposing this. That's one of the things we need to clarify today is what that buffer time would be. And then in terms of social equity, do they get more buffer time? Do they get a lower percentage? What is it that the social equity applicants would get?
I think when we last talked, Madam Chairwoman, you were talking about that this benefit fee starting the second year, at the beginning of the second year of operation, correct?
Yes, correct.
And in terms of the flat fee, I recall it was a range between 20 and 50,000. Do we come with a specific fee? Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 25?
Yeah.
We just talked about the range.
Yeah, I think there should be a specific number so that everybody knows.
Right. And did you want us to, did we want to make a recommendation to the council so that we can discuss that fee with them on Tuesday? Or do we want to give them the range and let them make some type of decision? Because I think if we want the city council to make that decision, then that might need to be another action item that we have to take. Alternatively, if we come to some type of agreement today and propose it, then we can just get their feedback.
I don't think so. I think this committee has been making the ordinances and has been making the policy. And I think if this this board can just give a number, that's what it is. I think when we have the city council too much involvement in there, there's a question of transparency. And, that leads to my selection for this committees, right?
Right.
So I know we said 2 years. After 2 years, I would prefer a 50,000 range, and that's what I'm looking at. And then the social equity portion of that, we did say that they needed more time, right? 2 years probably won't make that time. I was thinking more of 3. And then they start at 3 and they have a percentage, and I would put them at 25,000. And then that, I think, would have to be evaluated because they have to have an annual renewance of license, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be a renewance of license, and I think at that point the city would know exactly what they're making, and I would say that would ultimately go up. Yes.
Madam Chair, not to make this more complicated, but I think because we're kind of pioneer here in the South Bay of offering these types of businesses, that these things could really take off. Mm-hmm. So is there a way we could go with a flat rate or percentage, whichever's higher, so we're kind of protecting ourselves on the backside if should this become gangbusters and even the social equity firms are just killing it?
Right, and we did talk about that. The last meeting was we could have a floor, but not necessarily a ceiling, right? So we could say a minimum of 50,000, or I believe the city manager said 2%. Vaughn, was it 2%?
I thought it was 1.
1 or 2%.
We'll have to go back. I remember 2.
Okay, so 2%,
Yeah.
whichever is greater. We could do something like that.
And the social equity would have to
Would be-
language. How's the board feel about 3 years for social equity at 25?
Would it be possible we can do the 3 years, but have them complete an annual type evaluation of their business to see if we need to grant those additional 2 years? Because as Sergeant said, if they're like gangbusters and they're doing well, why would we concede and give 2 additional years?
Well, it's only 1 additional year.
1 additional year.
Yeah. But that could be how we do it. We could set it at 2 years with an option of 3 years if they demonstrate need. We can make it.
Yeah, that's
that
fine.
way.
I like
That's
that.
fine.
Through the chair, I would recommend
Yes.
1 year and then 2 years for the need, rather than 2 years, because that's a lot of lost income if we are.
So you're
getting
saying at a social equity, which is a startup, right? That is being helped.
Yeah, instead of 3 years, I would recommend 2 years for them, but for everybody else, 1 year.
Well, I think it is 2 years. Year 3, you're saying, right? So do they pay this fee at the beginning of the year or end of the year?
We discussed before at the beginning of the year, starting on year 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's in essence 1 year.
1 year, and then social equity would be actually 2 years.
That's
Right.
my recommendation.
Yeah. So that's
Okay, and then 2 years, which is 1, right? Because they start at 2 year.
So it would be, but just keep in mind that the first year, they have in the zoning code at least up to a year to get their business going. So build out
Right.
all their permits, whatever. So let's assume we're saying from the time the permit is, or the license is approved, they have a buffer year of 1 year, so 365 days from the day that it's approved. On that 366th day, we want the $25,000.
okay. So
the 50.
Or the 50, I'm sorry, or the 50, depending which business you are.
Or the 1%, whichever's greater.
couple of points, and it may be because I wasn't here at the last meeting, but so this is a fee in addition to the 5% gross
Correct.
tax. This is a mostly cash business, correct? So would they be paying these things in cash for city to accept?
No, we already determined that the only mechanisms for payment that the city is going to accept is checks, including cashiers, or what's the other one?
Money order?
Money order, cashier or money order or credit card.
Okay, so what about the 5% sales tax? Would that be through
The same.
same method?
Yes.
And is that an annual collection of the sales tax? I'm more concerned about the sales tax. It's because business like this, where and we just dealing with some of the other business entities collecting tax year ahead, that they collect a year ahead based on estimate.
So taxes, no. The sales tax isn't collected by the city directly. So they're going to be paying sales tax to CDTFA.
Okay.
They're going to be paying that to that entity, and that is a whole separate process. We don't
Okay.
do that. The city tax of 5% is what we were talking about, the frequency. Do we want to do it, collect it monthly? And then that means that we would have to send out some type of form for them to write, okay, this is how much I sold this month, and it'll be due by the end of the following month. So it's not in advance. It's actually in the rear. Or we would do it quarterly, which is also an option, and they would file quarterly taxes. So either of those, cities use both. For right now, what are you doing for business taxes? Is it annually?
It's annual.
It's annually. So I wouldn't recommend annually. I would say either quarterly or monthly, but we would just need to make sure that it's going to be a self-reporting assessment. So it'll be gross receipts, and we can also ask for verification. I believe we just need to, Robert, this is something that you just need to make sure, but I think we can ask for a copy of your sales reports or ledgers or whatever mechanism, and then that just to verify, or we can just simply have them self-report and do audits at random.
They could give us a copy of what they filed with the state.
That's only quarterly, though.
Oh, okay.
So the fee, anytime a city assesses fees, you have to have a public hearing.
Right.
So is this all part of the ordinance? And
So actually, that's my next item, Robert, was, that we need the fee, or we're going to need a fee, the fee schedule updated. So that is another part. We have to take the zoning text amendment, we have to take the existing fee schedule, incorporating all of our new fees, including our application fee. All of that has to go through the approval process too. So and I don't think the planning commission needs to see that one. So that would be part of the packet for the zoning ordinance. So it's not a part of the ordinance per se, but it is part of your existing fee schedule, which needs to be updated, and that update needs to go to city council. So
I
the
think
city
you
council will be
meant
making.
that would be part of the ordinance, not the zoning ordinance, but the other ordinance, yeah.
Exactly. So all of that would be go together per your direction about taking everything at once. So we would take the fee ordinance update. We're going to take the fee schedule update, the cannabis adult use ordinance. Both of those would be taken together. It's the zoning text amendment, which would incorporate the language. For example, just as a very general, we have a list of definitions in our zoning code, right? Now we'll have new definitions to add to that. So that's the zoning text amendment we'll have to do. But we can take the zoning text amendment through the channels that it has to go through, because it has a pit stop in planning commission.
which takes longer than
Right.
straight ordinance.
Right.
So we're not doing it simultaneously. It's going to be, there's a time lag.
Detour,
Okay.
yes.
So the fee is going to be attached to the zoning text amendment, which will go through planning?
No.
Or is it
No,
ordinance?
no.
The fee schedule will go with the ordinance.
Okay.
On the 26th.
Okay. So there's a public hearing on the first ordinance, introduction of the ordinance.
And the fee schedule would be part of that.
Okay, got
So
it.
they would take two separate actions. They're going to take an action on adopting the new fee schedule, and they're going to take an action on adopting the new ordinance.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think fee schedules are updated by resolution, are they not?
Yeah, I might need a resolution.
No, I think this is different because we're adding new fees, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's in the ordinance, and I think ordinance requires a public hearing.
Well, I think they both require a public hearing in this case, but I think fee schedules may be approved by resolution. We should check that.
I'll double check, but
Yeah. I think whatever it is that we need, I know we need to go to the city council, and we need to have an action.
And we could just add, again.
We can add them as separate agenda items.
if we need a resolution, can we put that, because you could always check with the previous history, right? Our
Yeah.
history.
Right.
And we could add that to the upcoming agenda.
That would be on the 20,
think-
yeah, somebody would just need to prepare the resolution. That's pretty much it.
So can I just for clarification purposes, so that we don't go back and forth, it's a 2%, right? 2% for what, social equity? What was it?
2%, so the language we'll read now, we'll have to update this, but the language would say, beginning year 2, so 365 days after your approval, the applicants, or at that point, there'll be permittees or operators will pay a minimum of $25,000 or $50,000 for general applications, $25,000 for social equity applications, or 2% of gross revenue, whichever is greater,
Is that for the social equity or for both?
for both.
Okay.
For both.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
Are we counting the days from the zoning approval or from the license approval?
We should probably do it from the license approval because you can't get the license approval. So it'll be the selection approval process to move forward, our CUP approval, and then the business license itself issued. Because you're gonna need both. You're gonna need your CUP entitlement
Right.
and your license. So that first half, they're not actually issuing the license, they're just granting the authorization to move forward.
Okay, so I'm sorry, then which date would we count from?
We would count from the approval of the actual business license day,
Good?
which would be shortly thereafter the CUP date,
Yeah, as long as it's after the CUP.
after the CUP
Yeah.
date, yes.
That's good.
We good?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was just going to say
Yes.
back to the cycle time for the city tax. I would just propose that we look at quarterly. I think monthly would be labor intensive.
It very
And
much
I
is.
believe, I believe most
Yeah.
cities that I've researched do it quarterly.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Are we, so is that a motion to make it quarterly? Are we
Yes,
good with that?
please.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Need a roll call. Do we need a roll call?
Yes, roll call, please. I think
Chair-
we needed the other one, too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll go back. We'll go back at the closing for the other one. Let's go ahead and do this one.
Chairwoman Reyes English?
Yes.
City Manager Norris?
Yes.
City Attorney Kim?
Yes.
Interim Planning Director Greg McLean?
Yes.
Sergeant Kenny Craig?
Yes.
The vote reflects committee members voting yes.
Great.
So let's go ahead and go to item D, which is the council's study session.
Yes, okay. Actually, we skipped C, which is the evaluation and oversight
Oh,
committees.
I
you wanna-
have writing all over it. That's why I
Okay,
missed
I'm
it.
sorry. Did you
'Cause I'm
want to go
taking
back to that?
Copious notes here. No, let's go to item C, evaluation oversight committees.
Okay, so we need to, we got an overview of what each of those committees would do, but Robert, you weren't at our last meeting, so we wanted to make sure that we circled back with you to make sure that how the committees were formed, that we are honoring that from the city council, and then also just find out what specifically we need to do to solidify the roles and responsibilities of that committee, of those committees.
So, in terms of, I know we had this discussion, not the meeting I missed, but the meeting before that. In terms of the, oh wait, I think this is at the meeting I missed.
Yes.
So the selection of the committee and the chair is done through the mayor selects and then the council approves under our ordinance for both committees. All committees for the cities are done that way. So the mayor would select the chair to lead the committees and the members, and then it will be approved by the vote of the rest of the council. But what we would do is just like how this working committee was created, I made certain recommendations by resolution, and then they go through it, and if it's approved, then it's approved. So for the, I think it would be, we have to ask the mayor who he wants to select as the chair. He previously selected a chair, but I don't know if he still wants this, if he changed his mind yet or not, but we would have to have a meeting with the mayor to decide who he initially wants to select as a chair and as the committee members. Then I could draft up a recommended resolution for them. So if we have certain, in the resolution, it would contain bylaws. So if we have suggestions from this working committee, then I could include that in the resolutions that the city council would adopt.
I do, thank you. At the last meeting, we discussed possibly having the working group committee make the selection. And we had feedback, and we were well aware of the, the process, because that's how we came about, right? Through the mayor's and the city council's approval. But my thoughts were, if the working group committee can make the selection, it gives it more transparency with regards to taking it away from the council's recommendations. So I think moving forward, what we could do is just make that question at the council. Can we make that instead of,
But the reason being is that that's in our ordinance.
right? So in other words, if I take an item, right, this item in particular, and put it on the agenda for the next city council meeting, which is the 26th, right? Is that the right date?
Yes.
Put an item on the agenda with regards to not just the question being made to the mayor, because he makes the appointment, ultimately the council has to vote on it, and find out what they want at that point.
Yeah, so we could put a discussion action item for selection of the chair and the members for the next meeting for the licensing committee and the oversight committee. And then
Right.
the council can vote it.
Right, so those two items will be brought for action discussion, and we'll pose it to the mayor, and then the council, and there'll be a discussion, and then we'll get direction. And then from there, we could go ahead and know what our marching orders are, right? And go from there. Are we good?
Through the chair,
So-
could you repeat those two questions, please? What would be the two questions that we're going to pose?
So the evaluation and oversight committees that need to be formed, right? That we're placing those two items on the agenda for the 26th city council, posing the question to the mayor and the city council on the formations of those two committees, on whether or not the working group committee can make the selection, make those selection committees appointees versus the council, and, just pose the question on either, again, whether or not we could do it and or if they want to do it. And again, the whole purpose behind this was, at the end of the day, the council's going to have full selection of those approvals, right? Those businesses. At the end of the day, that's going to be city council approval of the licensees, right?
So for the discussion action item for selecting the members and the chair, we could make recommendation, but
Yes.
the mayor can decide what he wants to do, and then the council will vote on it.
Right.
So maybe during this session today, we should consider what kind of, aside from the chair, which I believe will be the chairs will be one of the council members. So for the rest of the committee members, we should make recommendations and discuss right now what type of makeup of the, for instance, oversight committee, what are the rest of the members should look like. It should be a total of 5 members. That would include the chair. So what kind of, people with what kind of background? Whether we want any staff members on there, or the same thing for the licensing committee as well. So that should be discussed today.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I might make just one recommendation, is there, and Robert, let me know if this isn't possible, but could we take the action before the council as being giving the chair of this committee the ability to select the members of the other committees? Because I think that would expedite the process quite a bit, because if we're going to be formulating these committees and we're starting on the 15th, we would have quite a bit of delay for having all the council members figure out who's going to serve on all of these committees.
The thing is that because it's set in the ordinance, and in fact, it's so important, it's part of a new charter provision that we have a special meeting on tonight, how the city selects members of commissions and committees. And that's already placed in the ordinance, where it's which is the law, that the mayor selects the people that's going to serve, and then it has to be voted on by city council. So I don't think we could get around as a committee that ordinance, because the ordinance is the law that supersedes whatever the action. This committee has recommendation power to the city council, but it cannot override what's already said in the ordinance.
Right, I guess my question was just like, could that be the recommendation?
I see what
Can
you're
you,
saying.
can you pose that as the recommendation, that the mayor appoints the chair of this committee to do these other committees? Otherwise, we're gonna have to figure out those committees relatively quickly, because if the applications are coming in by September 15th, we need a processing committee before then, for sure. And we're definitely gonna need the oversight committee, since that's what they're oversighting.
August 15th.
August 15th.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
August
what did I
15th.
say, September?
August 15th.
I meant they're gonna come in by September 15th.
You're
Okay,
right.
so when you write the language for the 26th, you could include that, but at the end of the day, you know, recommendation for, from the council is, you know, suggested, right?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the way this working committee was formed was that the mayor selected the chairs, but in terms of the makeup of the committee members, is basically I just put it into I drafted the resolution and made recommendation, and council approved it.
Okay.
So that's the simplest way to go, but that should be discussed here as what type of people do we want serving on these committees, aside from the chair.
I would say, for starters, a makeup like this is good, that there's employees, you know, whether it be from the Department of Public Works, whether it be from, you know, the Finance Department. And then we could go, because this is gonna be the oversight committee I'm talking about, the oversight committee. It could be, you know, it could be employees here from City Hall. It could be also recommendations from school districts. It could also be faith-based, because at the end of the day, it's community-driven, right? The oversight. And I think if we go educational, faith-based, here, and business, something like that. So I could show just a full,
From what I've seen in other cities that have committees like this, you usually have some type of members from the community, residents.
yeah.
You also have a representative of somebody with experience and background in the cannabis industry. So, but as an oversight committee, I would think that either like a police detective, somebody from the detective bureau, or from the city attorney's office is fine as well. Somebody that can oversee because
That was hard, because, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Mine was, I was discussing the oversight committee,
yes.
not so much the evaluation, because.
Oh, the oversight
Yeah, the
committee,
oversight committee, yeah.
So, my suggestion is, so we need to come up with 4 members. One from the community of residents, somebody from the business community, maybe somebody from the staff, and somebody with a background in the industry.
Okay. And you'll follow the same rule for the evaluation?
No, evaluation, I mean, I don't want to just make suggestions here. Maybe we could have inputs from others here today of what maybe the consultants can, either Ebony or Tony can tell us, in terms of, I think the city of Los Angeles have a licensing committee, and it's made up of like attorneys and things like that.
No, the city of LA has the Department of
This regulation.
Cannabis Regulation that reviews all of their applications, but you also have to remember they do not have a merit-based process. So theirs is pretty much a by right use. So as long as you you submit complete materials, you get a license. So this is different because we are doing a merit-based program. So in terms of the application evaluation, we are using the model of West Hollywood, which their committee included staff and I think just a variety of folks selected by the planning director, I think it was. It was the planning department who made most of the recommendations. West Hollywood and a few other cities, I know Corona is like this and some others, County of Riverside is like this. They really put the process into the planning department where it really belongs, because it is just like any other land use application.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those decisions are made at the planning director level or a designee of the planning director. In this case, because we have the council oversight quite a bit. Those committees were formed at the city council level, and then therefore we have to follow that charter or what it says about selecting those members. But a lot of the information that's going to be reviewed would be appropriately approved by land use professionals.
So it would eventually, the license would go to planning anyways, because they would need to get a CUP, right?
Correct.
So you can't have a planning commissioner sitting on the license evaluation committee, then sit as a CUP. I would think that you would need to kind of have them separate. Wouldn't that be?
Possibly. I mean, I think that there are some pros and cons for both. The pro is that if you have a planning commissioner or a planning staff member on both committees, you're going to have the same level of consistency. But you could also make the argument that, okay, perhaps there is a conflict there. But is there really a conflict there? Because they're looking at the same issues.
It's not necessarily a
times.
conflict of
Right.
interest, but I'm concerned about a person that's sitting on both committees that would probably have too much influence. Yeah,
Yes,
just to one
that-
person.
Right. That is a very valid argument, you know.
So in terms of the evaluation of the licensing committee, I don't know, maybe we could go down the line and who do you, starting with Mr. McLean, or do you have any recommendation?
For the evaluation and licensing, no, I have no recommendation.
I would always want at least one person from the staff in all of these committees, so that it's not completely up to
Right.
outside members. But-
Can I just make mention, when we visited the city of West Hollywood, do you remember Miss Rocco? She's the Director of Public Works. She was very helpful with regards to, you know, a lot of the ordinance was because of the Public Works input and her leadership. So, you know, Public Works is something to consider too.
Madam Chair, if I may just refresh everyone's memory from what we discussed last meeting, which was having various department staff
Yeah,
members
that's what,
there. Yeah,
That's what I was making mention earlier. Various departments, again, similar to this.
similar to that may be.
Not trying to reinvent the wheel here, making it as simple as possible, but because the topic is oversight.
Well, both for the evaluation
And
and the
the-
oversight.
and evaluation, yeah.
Both of them, because the issue that we're going to run into is finding, we would have to set the criteria for, or eligibility to be on it, and then check with schedules and timing
Yeah.
and all of those things. So it is, in terms of a processing standpoint, probably best that we select staff members who are already going to be present in City Hall, so that when applications are coming in, we can have some type of concurrent processing, rather than having to hold special meetings. It may be, from a procedural standpoint, point more efficient to select city staff for at least the selection committee.
Can we go ahead and bring this to the council action again on the 26th?
Yeah,
Add this and pose it to the city council on whether or not in the selection of oversight and evaluation, if they prefer, city employees versus, similar to what other cities have done too. I think it needs to be posed.
so it will come back as a discussion action item that we just talked about, but we do want to recommend, because if you have a council meeting, during special meeting and during discussion action, they're going to go through what type of members for both committees. It's just the council meeting is gonna just drag on too
So
long.
let's just make the recommendation.
So we're coming up with a recommendation, and so we want staff involved in both committees.
Yes.
But in terms of other committee members, if you have other thoughts about it, then so far we came up with for the evaluation of the licensing committee, a staff member that is from Public Works. and
This
that's
is-
what we came up with.
Correct. And this is going to be the committee's recommendations to the council.
Yes.
And then, we already outlined, obviously, right? We
Yeah.
made an outline, but we want, similar to this. That's what
Right.
we're proposing.
So,
Right, I would recommend, Robert, that we say city staff or qualified industry professionals from, you know, a list of fields. And I think West Hollywood included planning, cannabis, legal, or those with working knowledge of the government codes. I think that's how they posed it.
Yeah.
So that way we can find individuals. Now, I would say either have the chair select those individuals, or the department heads pick those individuals, but that should be who's in it. It should be city staff or folks that have some type of working knowledge of cannabis and or government procedures and code.
Looking at this, and we have to come up with bylaws, and I'll probably be contacting you guys about that. But it seems to me that August 15th as a rollout for application seems a little bit overly optimistic, because we don't know what's going to be discussed. Just selecting the committee members and what's going to be in the bylaws is going to be kind of extensive discussion. And I know that this whole cannabis program is a little bit controversial. We don't have the full unanimous support of City Council. I think there are some council members who are opposed to the cannabis program. So thinking August 15th, we may want to keep that as a target date, but it may be a little bit optimistic because of not only the makeup of the members, but we have to come up with the bylaws.
Right. And I agree with you, Robert. I do believe it's very ambitious. However, I think one workaround, because I know there was a lot of discussion about kind of expediting the process, getting it moving. We could have some type of caveat or some type of attestation. Tony, tell me if I'm off legally here, but saying, hey, you can turn in your application based on these documents and the application supplemental documents, with the understanding that the city council still needs to make these actions. That is, a little controversial, obviously, Robert. That's going to make things a little tricky in how we process, but that is a way to move forward. Alternatively, we can keep the tentative timeline in play and just adjust as we need to based on our hearing on Tuesday, because after Tuesday, I think we'll have a better idea of what we can finalize and move forward, and the action items that we may need to have more time with. And at that point, we'd be able to make that decision if we need to push.
So for me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In terms of the licensing committee, I see their function and their roles and duties it's pretty simple, and that should be pretty straightforward. It's the oversight committee. What will be their goals and duties? So those are things that are a little bit up in the air, so.
And that's what we went over last week. Tony, I don't know if you have that document that talks about all of the things that we wanted, because I don't think Robert was here. I'm not sure if you got the minutes, Robert, but we did go over some of the items that we thought that the oversight committee would oversee. For example, any complaints about the process. So my application didn't get reviewed. I submitted it on time, but it says that I didn't submit it on time. Investigating those kind of complaints. I think we said anything with corruption or malfeasance or any of those kind of things as it relates to the application process. So once you have an application, or once you have an application processed and you are now moving on to the next phase of the process, the oversight committee wouldn't be overseeing that. They're not going to oversee the planning commission, or I'm sorry, the planning department, because there is a path for appeal process there. What they would be looking at is simply this process in terms of the selection, because it's not like we're granting them a license through that process. We're only granting them the authorization to move forward through the planning process, whatever that looks like for their particular project. So that committee, there's no appeal set yet, right? Because this is new, and it's a new ordinance. So the oversight committee would be what would be the body that would oversee any complaints or concerns with the application scoring and reviewing process.
So this is something that I could discuss with Tony later and find out exactly what was discussed. I did watch the YouTube video. I didn't read the minutes, and you watch YouTube video, it doesn't really stay in your head.
Right.
But in terms of there are details that need to be thought out, such as, let's say that they find some improper activity. Somebody made a contact with a city official, and we don't know the full extent of what was discussed. What is the authority of the oversight committee in following up? Those are things that need to be thought out ahead of time, and just trying to rush this through and have it set so that council would have something on the special meeting on the 19th, that may be kind of rushing it.
Okay.
So I do want to think things through, but in front of this committee, and so.
I want to be able to, and not to cut you off, I want to be able to bring it to the council and let them know that the working group committee has selected a date of August 15th to start accepting applications, so that they're aware of where we are in the process when we're given the additional questions to the council on the 26th. And then let it be there for further direction or recommendations, suggestions. But that's in itself, that's just a target date. I mean, at least we have, you know what I'm saying, versus not knowing and continuously getting these emails from businesses out there asking when are we, so at least we have a date and we'll go from there.
So maybe the 19th will be just a general discussion without taking any specific action with city council in terms of these committees, because this is, we really don't have the specifics yet.
Yeah. And I just wanted to basically verify what Ebony was talking about. When we talked about the oversight, we said investigations, violation of application rules, bribery, malfeasance, complaints, that's kind of what that committee specifically, but you're right. So you and I probably need to have a conversation offline and then bring it to the committee. So what are the next steps when these are determined to occur? Now what? I've just put general language as they're out, their application can be revoked, that kind of general type of thing. But you and I can kind of work out what that looks like if they do find one of these things.
And we would need to come up with that fairly soon because of Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on.
So just so I can make sure that we understand on our end for timing, because I know August is pretty tight for everybody. If we're going forward on Tuesday, the 19th, with the general, let's call it the overview and update to the council, right? We're gonna lay out the program for them, give them a copy of the application packet so they know what people can anticipate and understand what's happening. But once we release the documents, they're out in the world, right? So people are gonna start preparing. They're gonna start preparing for this process. We do that on the 19th. They're gonna give us some level of marching orders. We're planning to bring the ordinance back with the fee schedule on the 26th. All of that remains the same. The only issue would be when the oversight committee is formed and begins. That doesn't necessarily have to impact our application submission deadline, because we're screening them for completeness first. So that does give us, Robert, a little bit of time, if needed, throughout August to get those approvals that we need from City Council, because we have at least 2 City Council hearing dates for regular meetings and then any special meetings that we could add to get those committees finalized, and we can start review of applications once those committees are formed. So if the committees are not formed till September 15th or 30th, then we won't start review until the 30th, but we will have the applications in.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. City Clerk, you want to go back to the item that we needed to vote on? There was a recommendation, I think, a vote that needed to take place.
Yes.
What item was that?
It was the application intake process. You guys voted on $30 or something.
Oh, for the platform, $100.
Yeah,
That was the $100, Madam Chairwoman,
the
that
vote.
the 3 months of having the platform tool at $30 a month, but you just decided for a flat fee of $100.
Yeah, I think, didn't we vote on that? Okay, go ahead. Thank you. So the recommendation was $100 for the tools needed for the application needed for the online services. And the motion was made? Who made the motion? Was there,
City manager.
City Manager Vaughn Norris made the motion,
And Greg, second.
and Greg McLean, Planning Director, made the second. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Reyes English.
Yes.
City manager Norris.
Yes.
City attorney Kim.
Yes.
Interim planning director Greg McLean.
Yes.
Sergeant Kenny Craig.
Yes.
The vote reflects committee members voting yes.
Thank you so much, City Clerk, for reminding us of that. There's item D, which is the City Council study session, and I think we had a lot of
I
discussion.
think we're good on the study
I think we're good with what the session will include. So if everyone's in agreement, if you don't mind, I want to move on to
Can we just review that really quick?
yes, we can make that real quick. Item D, Ms. Anderson, just a rundown
Yes,
real quick.
absolutely. So next Tuesday, we will meet before the council, 6 p.m., and we will be going over an overview of the ordinance, which we did at our last meeting here. We'll do something very similar for the city council, obviously with visual graphics, but going over all of the elements that are included in the ordinance, including the various licensing types and the operational requirements that each of those have. We will also verify the number of licenses. We went over that last meeting as well, how many of each type of license that will be issued. And we will go over the zoning requirements. Greg, you'll have an email in your box about that, but we need to make sure we have those maps clean and ready to go. And then we will also go through all of the recommendations for the committee to the council in regards to the ordinance, which includes, like I said, the number of licenses, taxes being collected quarterly. We will go over the intake process as well as the schedule. And we will give pretty much an given the overall comprehensive update to what we've been working on thus far, and give them the roadmap for how we're going to go through the approval process moving forward.
Are we also gonna show similar to what you guys showed during the town hall about different industries? For instance, manufacturing, what it would description and showing photos of the existing.
Yes, we'll go through that. We won't go through our entire term sheet. If you all had a chance to look at it, it's pretty robust. So we will not be going through the entire term sheet, but we will be pulling out those different license types, what they look like, what's included, the legislative definitions, as we are incorporating those into our ordinance as well.
Right.
And what that would all look like.
I just want to add that during the town hall meeting presentation, from what I saw, I don't think we need to go into details of the state of laws on this.
Right.
I think it's just we need to present to them what the industry, really licensed industry, looks like. Because I have a feeling that some of the community and members and the council, they always envision this industry to look like unlicensed places and how bad it looks. So things of that nature, I think.
Absolutely. We will definitely do that. The presentation will really be focused on what we're doing here in Hawthorne for the program. So in terms of our ordinance, any of our operational requirements, our timelines, our process, that's what's going to be presented.
Yep. And I'm glad you made mention that, Robert, because that's what the city is trying to do, is, make it legal so that we don't have bad actors in our city. And the bad actors that we do have are in county. And more importantly, the ones that I saw recently will be shut down immediately because we have not even implemented an ordinance to accept that yet. So, but thank you for that.
Madam Chair, one other thing that I want to just make sure that's clear that we need to have done before we can finalize for Tuesday is that we talked about that community benefit program fee being the 2% or the flat fee rate, whatever is greater. But we didn't talk about how those funds would be allocated. So is our recommendation to the city council that those go to general fund to be allocated at a later date? Are we looking at something maybe that will go to, like, I think we mentioned the school district or some other program funding, some other funding mechanism specifically? Those are that's the one thing that I think we need to be clear about with our recommendation to them, as to how the funds collected from the community benefit program will be utilized.
If I could just start real quick. If I remember correctly, there was going to be a new fund, there was going to be a new line item for the community benefit portion of it, which means they are going to have to contribute to the benefit, community benefit, and all those funds are directed to a single account, which later on will then be dispersed, right, in the community. But it also gives the city an opportunity to include some of that in their general fund.
How do other, like, for instance, is this something that the West Hollywood has as well?
Well, it's something that different cities have. So it could be a community agreement, could be you have, the operators can designate what the money is going to go to after talking with the city. So you could have 1% of gross income is going to go for recs and parks. 1% is going to go for senior citizens programs and initiatives. So it really kind of depends.
I think this is an issue that I think the city council would be excited to decide on for themselves.
Okay.
I think for us to recommend a specific, maybe a nonprofit or things of that nature, I think I know that this is something that council prefers.
Oh, no, I think, yeah, that's, okay, so.
So is the recommendation just that it's going to be in the general fund? I think what we're trying to do is just understand what to put in the presentation to pose to them.
And also being mindful of the difference between the general fund and some type of special fund that has to be created and has a
Yes.
different
maybe,
regulatory framework.
Separate account maybe, but my personal preference is have these kind of funds for homeless program and for this school district and education. I think those are great ideas, but I know ultimately it's going to be the city council that decide what to do with it. I think as long as we keep this fund in a designated account, I think finance can keep up with it. So.
Yeah, that's why I said what I said, because this is a new revenue stream for the city. And because it's a new revenue stream for the city, we don't want to put it in the general fund. We want to be able to have a fund to show the growth of this new cannabis program. So based off of that growth in that new fund is the city's discretion on how it could be used. But ultimately, how those uses are done would be brought to the council, and the council will vote on how those uses are done. Just like the city, the police department has forfeiture fund. Forfeiture fund needs to come to the council for it to be allocated to wherever they want it to go to. But it's not part of their general fund. It's a forfeiture fund.
It's going to be a restricted. It should be a restricted fund.
Yes.
But with council having the discretion to give it to a nonprofit or a certain type of program for the city.
Yeah, that
Madam
comes
Chair.
late. That comes later. That's like way later. What she's asking now is, do we want to put it in a general fund, or do we want to implement a new revenue stream fund? And my response was, create a new fund for this new ordinance program. Don't mix it into general. That's what I'm saying.
I agree.
Madam Chair, I agree with that. Could we maybe just have it as a designated special fund with just the caveat that it's only to be spent on community improvement?
Correct.
And then that's very general, and then the council can decide
Correct.
how to allocate later.
However, knowing the possibilities of the growth of the fund, it's also at the discretion of the city, right? The city council, the leaders, which is our city manager. In moving this fund, should it need to be moved for whatever purpose or reason, right? Say to the general fund or another entity that is in need. So Yes, all of it ultimately is under the discretion of the city, the leaders, the city management that brings the items to the council for approval. So that's the recommendation of,
Because 5% sales tax will go to the general fund, correct? So
That's the question that we have for all of you, is that so your tax streams are gonna go into some mechanism that you specified in your budget, right? So in your tax initiative, it should have said where this money would be allocated to. And I can't recall off the top of my head, but I think it did say the general fund, but I'm not
Yes.
100% sure of that.
yes.
Oh, look, I think.
So my question is, we have the tax funds going in one place. This community benefit funds, if we call it a special account, there are ways that a city has to formulate your special funds versus your general funds, right? So has that been done? And if not, what does that process look like in terms of, we're past July 1, I'm assuming the budget is already done.
well, so this isn't like a grant program where it's completely restricted, but I would think by city council resolution that they could put it into a special fund, somewhat restricted at city council's discretion, because I think there is right now a list of nonprofit events and whatnot that city council can contribute their stipends to. So it could be something similar, but with a new category of, I guess, where council can decide where to give that
Allocation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I guess the only thing I want to put on your radar is why we're formulating this. It's just making sure, there's always the concern of misappropriation, right? So we want to make sure that we are very clear about where these funds being set up properly and then funneled properly. That's where I'm getting with this.
Okay, so, yes, absolutely right. Okay, so taxes, just like any business, goes into our general fund, right? So it's,
Tax, right, but that's a tax versus the fee.
Yes, no, and I get that. So, but there was a question posed on taxes. Okay, so that goes into our general fund. So the creation of the community benefit, very simple, need to create a new revenue stream, a new account.
A new account. There we go.
That is a new account. And and the growth of that account and how it's dispersed in a community benefit way comes to the council.
Okay, perfect. So this would be a new account of ultimately the general fund, though, because it'll come in as a mainstream
Right.
line item like all the other fees of the city, and then allocated into a special account that the city council will then create and also pull from for specified projects and programs.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's I think it's just a matter of accounting, and the finance
Yeah.
department can handle that. Yeah.
Just make sure whatever it is, I want to make sure that it's very clear on our FAQ sheet and on the website so that we know.
Absolutely.
Because we'll get a lot of questions of, okay, we're paying $50,000, where's it going? What are we using it for? We want to make sure that we're really transparent on that, but also not limiting the council on what they can use the funds for. So I think that's a great way. We'll spell it out that way.
Yep.
And then the council, if they have recommendations on Tuesday, we can amend.
Yeah, and at this point, it's too premature to talk about who it's going to.
Right.
The language is a community benefit, to benefit the community.
We'll just use general language saying that the funds will be used for community development purposes at the discretion of the city council during budget
Right.
hearings or something of that nature.
Exactly.
That way that we will have a public hearing for every allocation of that funds anyway, because it's going to go through city council.
And not to get confused with the actual 5% tax of
Perfect,
business.
yes.
Okay? That's totally general fund revenue.
But there we go. Perfect. Okay, we got it on our end.
Okay, thank you. That's the rundown. Are we good, Mr. Norris? We're good?
Yes, thank you for
Okay.
providing that.
Thank you. Let's move on. Item number 4, meeting updates, and we might be redundant, but we just want to make sure we have everything that we need. So the draft ordinance.
So I just we put this on here just as a continuation from our last meeting, and we're going to try to do it for every meeting, just going through what we previously discussed and making sure those action items got done. So the draft ordinance is pretty much done with the exception of the amendments that we need to make to it based on our conversations today. So those will take place. The zoning text amendment, we are working on that, and we will work with the planning department to get that processed properly. The application materials, we sent you all the bulk of those last week. We will have a complete application package and everything ready to go, at least for the planning commissioners, the applicable parts of the application process that they're going to be interested in. For example, the scoring criteria, that's something that they would be interested in. I'm sure they don't want to see the form with your name, address, and phone number. But our social equity application, the list of documents that need to be submitted as part of the completeness application review, we'll give all of that to the city council. We'll have all of that done by Tuesday. But any of our additional documents or internal working drafts, we'll table those until finalizing those until we go live and update with any city council revisions. So that includes so for Tuesday, you're going to see the highlights of the draft ordinance, obviously, because that's what we're going to be reviewing. We're going to look at some of this scoring criteria sheet so that you can see what we're going to evaluate these things on, what's being submitted, and how we're evaluating them. We're saying we as in the city, not us specifically. And then we'll go through, we won't do the text amendment because obviously they don't need to see that yet. And then just make sure that we go through all the criteria of everything that's going to be required for each set of applicants, both the general and the social equity applicants.
Can I just make a real quick recommendation? Unlike our town hall meetings that we had, and you showed photos, I don't want potential photos that are going to be applicants.
Okay.
So, because the question's going to be asked, ooh, where's that one at? Ooh, who's that? So if there's going to be photos to just show what some of the, what they look like, right? We visited some. What they're going to look like, I really want to assure those names are not mentioned.
So do you want it, you want us to have photos that don't show the specific location? Or are you asking for us to,
If you're going to show, say, for instance, a photo, right, of what it could look like, so that folks have an idea, because like Robert said, they have a perception.
right? Well, we can try to pull some from like out of state or something like that. We just wouldn't be able to obviously say for certain that they wouldn't. We don't know who's going to apply.
Absolutely.
Right?
As long as
Yeah, we don't know who's going to apply, but we can take it. We can make them so they're indescript, so that way we don't show any logos or
yeah,
anything
Exactly.
I think you could Photoshop it and just
Yeah,
block
sure,
out
we
the
can.
brand
Okay.
or the logos,
Yeah,
things
we could
like that.
definitely
So
do
we're
that.
good on that.
Yes, we are good
Okay.
on that.
And,
Absolutely.
And let me also make mention, this is going to all be put on our study session, right? In our
Yes.
study session. And then I want to give direction, city manager. Can we also assure applicants who are submitting their completed application, they're walking in here, right? They're submitting a full packet to your
We'll have some type of check-in counter or
Yeah.
some type of,
check-in counter.
and I'll work with you on that, Vaughn, to figure out the specified locations. But we'll definitely have a whole setup.
Okay, so I want to assure that those coming in and have to pay, right,
Yes.
get expedited to the city clerk's, not the city clerk, excuse me, cashier, to our cashier, so that they could be processed and out with regards to, they know that's a big, heavy lift.
Right.
Because it's my understanding, at our session 2, you'll list the cost for each license.
Yes, we will. And I'll bring that, I'll probably, we did a draft for that as well last week, so it'll be something around there. The only thing that we need to talk about is just making sure that we cover the administrative costs. And I think we just did a general 10% or 12%, whatever it was, but I'm going to go back and make sure the accounting matches up so that we're at net zero, because that's exactly what we need to do, is make sure that it's full cost recovery, because that's what the city council approved.
Right, and that needs to be put
And that'll go in the fee schedule.
on the fee schedule, brought to the council, perhaps on the 26th if need be.
So
Correct.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes.
The 30 days period that we're gonna allow license applications, instead of 30 days, how do we come up with the 30 days, by the way?
We use just generally what
Other cities.
typically what other cities do. It's roughly 30 days, some are less, some are 10.
Instead of the days and the timeline, can we make it so we accept up to 30 applications or for social equity by a certain number? Is that something that's a no-no in the industry?
Well, you don't really want to do that because
That's what happened in LA.
yeah, because once you do that, you're gonna. What happens is, let's say you say, okay, we're gonna accept 30, and all of them are incomplete. Then what? Or let's say, 28 of them are incomplete. They're missing one document. Let's say all of them, right? Then you're limiting the pool of applicants as well, because you're only going to be able to accept. If you did it on a rolling basis, you're going to have 30 people who are going to submit on the first day. That doesn't give you the best pool of applicants to pull from necessarily. You might have the best applicant on the 30th day. So giving people the full amount of time, especially if you're having a social equity program or if you're really looking to get startup businesses, what you're going to get is all the MSOs who have their applications already done. Everyone who submitted to West Hollywood is going to dump 30 applications on your desk the first day.
Well, no, my concern is that if we just leave it up to 30 days and let's say we only get like 10 applications, then.
Oh, then we can extend the deadline, of
Okay.
course.
All
Yeah,
right.
we could
Okay.
always extend it. We just can't make it shorter. So we said 30 days as ample time because we're doing ongoing review. So it is foreseeable that you have an applicant, especially a startup business, they come in and they're missing 4 documents and you send them back and they come back and now they're missing 2 and you send them back. And by that 30th day, they have all 28 documents.
Yes.
So, that's the process that we're going to be going through, especially if we're allowing or encouraging new businesses to start in the city. You're going to really have to have that support through that application period and the 30-day minimum, not maximum.
I was going to
First
say.
come, first
gonna-
serve is always problematic because the MSOs already have everything done. And it takes a while for the independent operators to get everything together. And Ebony's absolutely right. They dump the first hour. They
Right.
have somebody in
I
10
promise
minutes.
you, we're going to have
I know.
applications the first day.
I know, I know. They're going to be so excited. They want to be first. And guess what? They're going to end up last. Go ahead, Vaughn.
Through the chair, my question is, are we still collecting applications online, or will it be
Yes.
100% in person?
So it'll be both. So
Okay.
we're going to have an online path for those who might be out of state or may not be able to come down to the city, to turn in all their application. However, they have to send somebody to go pay for the application.
my next
So we
question.
do have the agreement or the disclosure they have to sign saying, I am authorized by the applicant. I'm either an applicant or an authorized agent allowed to pay for this application or submit this application. We will have that disclosure both online and in person that they sign saying that they're the person. You usually take like a picture of their driver's license to attach it to the application.
If you remember, we
It was two
discussed.
signatures. It was two signatures,
We
yes.
discussed 2 people's names on.
Yes, so it has to be at least one person listed as an applicant, and then they can have an agent
Right.
that would submit it. But it would be 2 signatures that would be required to submit any application, whether online or in person.
Right. And we can't have in reverse. People show up that were not part of the online, right? Because we talked about, if you remember, we wanted to make sure that
Yeah, they
whoever
can.
they send has not only the authorization, but can act on behalf of, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So they could do it online. They have to pay in person no matter what. So we don't have an online payment processing system. So they're going to have to send someone down here to pay, regardless. That person who they're sending to pay, I guess, we don't have them submitting any type of attestation because typically people aren't going to be paying tens of thousands of dollars
Right.
for fun. So we don't really have an issue there. It's really submitting the application and signing that it's complete. So that's where we would have that disclosure online or in person. You need two signatures saying that either you're the applicant, or if you're an agent, then you need both your signature and the applicant's signature, which would make sense.
And those are the state, those are the ones would also have the state licensing, right?
The authorized agent may not be the person who receives the license, but the applicant is. So you'll have the applicant signature and the authorized agent
Okay.
saying that I'm an authorized agent and this applicant has authorized me as an agent. And that's pretty typical, just like in planning, we have an
Right.
authorized agent form. So it'll be something similar to that, giving them the right to submit an application on their behalf.
And then when you're here accepting those and they're completed and you see that they're verified and completed, is there going to be a stamp method? Is there going to be a signature method?
Yes,
From
so
your part?
it'll be both. They will get a copy of the sign attestation that they signed saying that I submitted this. It'll have a checklist of everything that they submitted. They will initial everything with the plan checker who's going through saying, okay, you have this form done, this application, this is done, this is done, this is done. Sign it. You agree. They'll verify the signature to make sure they're either an applicant or an authorized agent, and then that's how they would get that process submitted complete.
And then once completed, they're escorted to cashiers to make their
They actually pay first.
they pay first and then come out.
Yes,
Got
because
it.
you have to pay for the time to review it.
That's why we
So-
want to make sure we.
So that's what I was going to ask, City Manager. Your staff will have some kind of receipt that will show the payment that they can include in part of their application process,
Yeah.
correct?
Absolutely. My question goes back to the online registration. So you have an applicant that submits their paperwork, and they submit their payment after the 15th.
They have
Are
to
we
pay
gonna-
first before they submit.
Before they submit the application online?
Yes.
Payment has to come in.
Yes, because that's one of the requirements to submit it online is a copy of your receipt.
Okay.
So they have to submit. So the way that I think we're going to do that, and that's why we have to get the software so we can play with the controls, the security controls. But what we're thinking of doing is having a unique link for an applicant who wants to submit online. So once they've demonstrated, so we'll have some back and forth probably via our Hawthorne email, cannabis email. They'll submit a request to submit online, and we send them their specified link. So it's not going to be, in theory, I haven't figured out if I can exactly do this, but instead of just having a general mailbox where anybody can drop stuff in anytime, it'll be a unique link per applicant. And they would only be able to get that link once they have paid.
Okay, so when they go online, we have a cannabis working group committee online item, right? It's online. That shows all the meetings, all the minutes. It has, general information, right, where we're at with regards to the ordinance. Does it already show the potential licenses for the recommendations from the council? Does it show that yet?
Not yet,
Okay.
but it will.
At what-
After Tuesday,
Okay.
we'll update all the new FAQs. We're working on them now, but we'll
Okay.
post them. That will include all of the information and the direction from the council.
So it'll say retail license, 25,000,
Yes.
cultivation,
Well, we will have, it'll be the proposed amount, because remember, the fee schedule won't be adopted until the 26th.
right.
So we'll have a copy of the
Hy-
draft fee. Yes,
Hypothetically
exactly.
speaking, but I do remember the dollar amounts that we've been discussing since this committee's been formed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll have all of those in there, and it'll have the language that says the date that they'll be adopted into code, or at least go before the commission, or the planning, no, I'm sorry, it'll go before the city council for approval. So we'll update with the process. We actually have a process document that shows you first, second, third, like where you go. So we'll have all of that up to the community to see, showing them when we're starting, what's the roadmap look like, and what's the cost.
I can't remember, was the fee the same for social equity?
The fees are all the same
They're
for all
all
of
the
them.
same.
The fees are all the same
Okay, got
across
it.
the board.
Any other questions, recommendations, suggestions, anything else? Anything from the council? This is item number 5, meeting recap and conclusion. Mr. Craig?
No, Chairwoman, all good. Good
You're
meeting.
good.
Thank you.
Mr. McLean? Mr. Norris?
Yes, if you can give the committee an estimate of time, how much time is going to be needed on Tuesday as far as your presentation? Eliminating the questions, obviously.
I think we specified that we would have the whole meeting take place for 2 hours, wasn't it? So
That's what we-
in terms of our presentation, I would say maybe 45 minutes. We'll need to just present, and then we'll probably have all the questions and answers after that.
So 2.5.
Thank you.
One other thing just for, oh, I'm sorry, it's not my turn.
Yeah, no, Mr. Kim?
Yes, thank you. If once we come up with the ordinance and we form the other two committees and the licensing application begins, then there's no further need for this committee. Is that
Right.
correct? Okay, so this committee would dissolve, right?
Well, that was actually one of my questions about this committee is, I know we talked about this last time about meeting as needed or from time to time as needed. Do we need to do anything special or take anything to the council to recommend that change? Because right now it's the second and fourth Thursday indefinitely, or was there a date set?
Well, I think this committee is actually an ad hoc committee. It's not formed to last forever. It doesn't have purpose to do that. So the main purpose under the resolution was to come up with the ordinance, and that was the main point, is to come up with the ordinance for cannabis, and also to implement a process for it and create the other two committees. And I think once we have accomplished all that, then I don't see a reason for this committee to continue to have meetings.
I agree.
Right, but that'll come after everything's been approved by the city council, right? However, we do still want to bring the question posed to the city council and the mayor with regards to our suggestion, recommendation to the council to let the oversight committee continue. Remember, if we want to make the selection for the oversight and evaluation. And I think Mr. McLean said interesting. However, again, it was for the transparency purposes and to show that there isn't too much involvement from council. So that's something we're going to present and make recommendations on the 26th. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anything more? Anything further?
Just-
Go ahead.
Oh, just for me, if I might, I want to just get clarity on one thing on the eligibility criteria for social equity. I know we gave our 4 criteria, saying 2 out of the 4. Did we want to move forward with making any of those a set requirement and the others the optional requirement, or add the startup business requirement? Do we want to go ahead and move forward with at least adding and having a 5th option for eligibility, or making one of those 4 required and the other 2, the other 3 they can choose from?
I'm in favor of a social equity program for somebody that's starting up, not for somebody that already has a business.
So, okay, so I want to make sure that we're clear about like social equity, right? So social equity doesn't just mean startup. It's all of the folks who've been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, meaning that they've lived in an area that was disproportionately affected, the over-policing, incarceration, all of those things come up with social equity, not just whether or not you are a startup business. So if we're targeting startup businesses, then I think we need to make that one of the criteria for sure. Like one of the required criteria.
At least myself personally, I'm in favor of when it have a social equity program, it shouldn't be somebody that's already has a ongoing cannabis business, that basically that person already has an opportunity. I think for me personally, I prefer to allow someone that's starting a new opportunity.
So do you want, Robert, something to the effect of a first-time cannabis entrepreneur as the mandatory part?
Yes.
And then they have to have
The other factors as well.
how many other factors? So
Two-
that's
two-
going to
two
be
of the 4.
2 still, right?
still the 2 others. So it's that and 2 others.
Yes.
Okay.
To the chair here.
Yes.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
I don't agree.
Okay.
I don't agree. History has it, since 2016, in other cities that the sole purpose for the social equity is for those that are disenfranchised and have been a target, if you will. We have lots of folks that have been incarcerated for years because of cannabis. And those are the ones that are now being advocated for to get them out, right? So how can we right a wrong by social equity? And social equity doesn't speak to existing businesses. You're not, that's common sense. A brick and mortar business that's been established for years has already a lead with regards to applying, right, for a business. The social equity portion of it that speaks to the licensing portion of it that speaks to the tax requirement, a certain amount can't make, a certain amount, what was it, 79,000?
72.
70-some thousand. That is below a tax of, say, 18 million, or someone else that has had cannabis since 2016. City of West Hollywood's been doing it since 2016. Those, that have been doing it for quite a number of years, especially after the state-approved licensing, has it in their mandate that it be a social equity component in assisting those businesses that want to ultimately start a business. But it does not say that they can't be existing businesses. I think that's where everybody misinterprets what that means.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree with that. I think there is a misconception that social equity is synonymous with startup, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, and it quite, frankly, is not. For example, if you had a social, and again, the city council will be able to select these applicants, right? So what we're doing is finding ways to screen some of these applicants out, but by focusing solely on startup businesses, we have some challenges with that too, because now we're looking at individuals who make under $70,000 a year, coming up with a minimum of $25,000 in a year to even get to be compliant, meeting all the requirements of a business that costs a lot more than $70,000 to run. You have to understand these businesses are running at the very minimum of like probably $70,000 a month. So they're going to be making more in a month than they made in a year. It just isn't realistic, because a startup in this industry requires a lot of resources to do. I do think that limiting maybe the amount of licenses they have may be more sufficient. For example, you wouldn't want perhaps a social equity applicant that has 10 licenses throughout the country.
Right.
That's not what you're looking for. But saying that they can't have any other businesses is really tricky. It's really difficult to expect them to perform at the level that we would want them to perform here, or that we've discussed these businesses performing,
Right.
if we eliminate everyone who has any other business at all.
I would make a recommendation to look at the city of Los Angeles and why it was sued over social equity. Right, that's what I'm saying. Take a look at city of Los Angeles social equity and how it was sued
Multiple
times
Yeah.
because of social equity.
Well, it was
For
first
LA.
come, first serve. It was.
It was a total mess.
Yes, right.
When
Yeah, and I think-
when they opened up the cannabis Department of Cannabis Regulations, it was inundated with applicants of all sorts
Very true.
trying to qualify for social equity, and at the end of the day, the description that they provided for social equity was totally not what it was set up to be.
And it has changed since.
And it has been changed since. So, we need to tread lightly with that. I'm familiar with it. I'm going to tread lightly with that. But we said 2.
So we're going to stay with the 2.
We said 2.
And out of the 4.
Yes, we said 2 because, again, there's requirements that we already made mention that they have to qualify for. It's no different than a regular business. The difference is because of the history of how individuals not in a minority, we're not able to get businesses up and going.
And get the resources. And I think it's important just to note, and that's how we have our social equity program kind of set up, is it really is focusing on those who have been greatly impacted by the war on drugs. So
And that's what we put in the preamble.
and that's what we're really focusing on. And even further so in the locally, because the other issue is you have folks from out of state or out of the general area coming in for licenses. So that's why we have those provisions about having some type of connection to the city, whether it's through home
Right.
ownership or property ownership or
Right.
just residency, because we do want to make sure, it seemed like the council was really focused on not so much a startup in the traditional sense, but a local business or local residents having an opportunity to participate in the process. I think all of that is important, and I think if I'm not opposed to adding either a question on the application or adding it as a criteria, one of the potential criterias of being a startup or new cannabis entrepreneur, and letting the council decide, if there's any additional scoring that we give those people, that maybe this is their first time, so we award them a few extra points or something like that. That might be a compromise to that, but I don't think that we should make it an absolute requirement to be a startup.
Yeah, what I'm afraid of, and because of the history of some of these businesses that want to operate as a retail business, say for instance, they ultimately have to shut down. And what I mean by that is because of all the other things that were put into place that didn't necessarily fall under the social equity component. In other words, I've seen it happen. Businesses that opened up, spent all this money, and they didn't have, say, existing knowledge or existing operations of other businesses that they were doing, right, came crashing down because they didn't have the experience or the know-how. Were excited to do it just because it was a social equity that, they thought first time doing this type of, and ultimately failed. I'm not looking for anyone to fail here. We want to help those individuals that want to ultimately apply. And I do remember in the consulting agreements that you would be, in a sense, helping in that effort, helping move along these businesses to successfully, to
Get through the
to
process,
flourish
right? Yeah,
through the
And-
process.
right, absolutely. And we do have that technical
Right.
assistance as part of.
Technical
we
assistance
have
is
that.
part of the benefits that we talked about, and giving them access to lists and other vendors, professional vendors that can help them operationally.
And the other thing, and I'm going to be quiet here in a moment, but you got me going, Robert. is this. When they know that they have to provide a certain amount of monies and or percentage to a community benefit, they're going to look at that application. They're new to business, never done this before, and already have to fold because they can't commit to that percentage or that large dollar amount of $25,000 a year. There's no, you see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to set folks up to fail.
I think the city has been incredibly, progressive with the transparency, right? And so telling a startup business, even because we say startup as if you can't have multiple startups, and having one business doesn't mean your next business isn't a startup. It very well is, and especially in cannabis where the target's always moving. So you're always a startup. It always feels like that, at least.
Right.
And
Mr. McLean, did you have a question?
I have a suggestion that may roundabout sort of address this, and that would be that all social equity candidates also be considered in the pool of general candidates. That way, if we get, someone who's got a lot of existing businesses and that would qualify anyway, they could be considered if they're not selected as a social equity.
Oh, that's what we have in there. So
Okay.
if they're not selected as social
I'm sorry,
equity,
I'm gonna have to.
then they
be-
can apply
have
for
to
general
ask to
pool.
be excused because I'm really late for my next meeting.
Yeah,
right
go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Craig?
Yeah, Madam Chair, again, not to extend this longer than it is, but when I first heard the concept in this program,
Thanks, Rob.
I was excited about, members of our community being able to, change their life.
Right.
Would the committee possibly consider, we talked about the 4 requirements, and what I would like to see is that it benefits somebody in our community. Could we make at least the household requirement a requirement so that it's somebody that has lived here or owns a home here? And
Or
make
has,
that a
or
requirement?
is part of that home? Has lived it in part,
Yeah, a
the home
renter or
ownership
whatever.
and/or
Yeah, just
occupant?
have
We could
lived
just say,
here.
we could just say
Have lived here.
residency.
yeah.
Yeah, residency for,
The 10-year cumulative residency,
Yep.
But
That's the-
Kenny, are you speaking of someone currently living here? You want them to currently be
No,
residing?
10-year, 10.
No, yeah, I know that, but he
but
was-
yeah, but a member of the community now for the last 10 years. Is that a possible, am I saying
I
that
think we
incorrectly?
have two different ones, so
Well,
I'll
there's-
let Tony
there's-
read both of them, so then that way we can decide which one you're talking about, because we have a 10-year total, and then we have one within a certain time frame.
But that's in a lower socioeconomic
right.
neighborhood, right?
Yeah, we have the 10-year cumulative residency as a Hawthorne homeowner or part of the household, a Hawthorne household.
Resident, so it's just
So,
resident.
yeah.
That's
you
the one
want-
I'm speaking to.
So you want 3? You want?
No, I'm not saying 3. Just that could be one, but that's one that it's going to be
Required.
a definite. So
That's the mandatory.
It could be
baseline.
that and the
And any of the other
and the
3.
conviction.
Yes.
But just make that one a requirement. What my concern is, and again, I'm not trying to categorize that application pool, but somebody who lives in, I'm just making up a city, lives in Merced, California, and hasn't never lived in Hawthorne, would qualify in the other 2, and we're giving one of these 2 social equity licenses to them, and they've never had an association with Hawthorne.
Right.
Those 2 are very precious licenses. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to save them for somebody in the community.
No, right. You're absolutely right. There was 4 requirements, right? And you had to make
2, yeah.
no. Initially, you said
Right, but what the officer is saying is that residency requirement is the requirement. You have to have the 10-year residency of Hawthorne and then have one of the other 3. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yes,
Correct?
exactly.
Okay.
Because right now you could not live here, not have any association with Hawthorne, and get one of those licenses if you meet the other 2.
Yeah, that's
I
the
just
social
wanna make-
equity. That's the
yeah.
social equity applicant
Yes.
application. I thought you said there was 4, and you have to meet either the 2. But now we're making the requirement is 10 years. Stakeholder resident here in the city of Hawthorne, right? Maybe not.
There's
stakeholder,
four.
Madam Chair, if I could clarify, it's still the 4 criteria.
Right.
I'm just advocating that one of them's required.
Okay,
It's still only 2, but one of them's required. Is that okay or doable?
that's fine. Let's make.
Can I,
if that's
can I
what
make
you mean.
a variant on that as an alternate suggestion?
Yes.
I think that we run the risk of not getting any social equity applicants, and so maybe that should just be weighed as a like a bonus factor or something that gives them more
Like in the screening.
more
rate.
points. And the other thing to consider is the viability of the businesses. If we have a lot of really viable candidates that have experience and so forth, we may not want to shoot ourselves in the foot and cut off a revenue stream by selecting, people basically purely on the requirement that they're residents. So I would recommend instead that we just put a weight on that favors it.
And that's, Greg, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because under the weighted criteria, there is a social equity score sheet that gives you points based off of those things. So here we're saying this is how you become eligible. You need to meet some of these things, okay? Submit your application. But how we rate the application or how we score the application is you're getting basically bonus points for those different things.
Got it.
So those are the ways that we could, there are social equity bonus points for general applications too. For example, if they're going to put 25% of their shelf dedicated to social equity products, because we might have more than retail, we might have some cultivators in there or other brands. There's some other components. So I think one of them is promoting local non-discriminative practices. If they have that in their application, they get a bonus point for that, even though that's federally required, but still, we give them a bonus point. So we can take those 4 criteria and weight them based on that. That way, we can give more points to local,
Okay.
and then that
That'd be great.
way, they do have that weight, that extra weight there. We can do it that way.
And part of the weight, are we adding that they are startup businesses, first-time entrepreneurs? Are we going to include that as part of the weighted criteria that we talked
Updated.
about before?
If we add that, would you like, I guess we're asking, do you want to add that as a weighted item as well? Maybe give a bonus point if you are a new applicant? Or we just leave the new application part off? I'm sorry, new
New business?
business.
I'm not in favor of it.
I think we leave it off based on.
I think we're good.
comments,
I think we're
Madam Chair.
beating a dead horse.
Okay.
That,
So-
or we're hungry and we need to go.
All right, so then we will, wrapping
I
this up,
apologize.
we're gonna update this score sheet and the other supplemental docs based on our information today, and we'll get those, we'll have everything for Tuesday's meeting, and then ultimately, the 26th, we'll have final drafts of everything for the 26th.
So thank you, members of the board, for your recommendations and input. Good meeting. That was the reports and recommendations, and we already made those reports and recommendations for the 19th and the 26th, and you have your marching orders. And if there's anything further from this meeting, we're just wrapping up 100 years here in Hawthorne, so thank you again, Von Norris, City Manager, City Attorney, Craig McLean, police, everyone that celebrated this past weekend 100 years, and look where we are today. Cannabis Working Group Committee meeting. I'll adjourn this meeting at 1:15. Thank you so much.